Afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all keeping safe and well at this very challenging time. I'm really pleased to be speaking to you today. So for anyone that doesn't know me, my name's Anisha Patel, and I'm a technology director at Paddy Betfair. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about sort of my journey and in a world that is probably quite male dominated as a technology industry, some of the things that, some of the mistakes I've made, some of the learnings I've had, and to share some of those experiences with you, and hopefully to help you move forward in your own careers and not make the same mistakes I did. But before I sort of start to go into some of those things, what I wanted to do is share a little bit about myself and kind of the journey that I have been on. And so first and foremost, kind of most importantly, I'm a mum. I'm raising two daughters, Naya, who's nearly 8, and Anya, who's nearly 5. I'm also a wife and I'm also a daughter. And I've been thinking a lot this week about how and what kind of key messages to share with you all. And really, I whittled that down into 5 or 6 kind of key messages. So kind of wanted to start off by talking a bit about my background and where I come from, the kinds of things that I've done. I grew up in the East End of London, and for those of you that know, the 2012 Olympic site is sort of in that sort of region, and I grew up as a part of a fairly traditional Indian family, which actually have quite a lot of similarities to Romanian culture. And so there was a real expectation on me to, study and work hard and have a career. And so I obliged, and my parents were encouraging me to study engineering, and I went on to study computer science at Brunel. And after graduating there, I did a couple of roles, experimental, I would probably call them, in sort of sales and other kind of things, to just sort of see where my strengths and things were, but hadn't really found my way, and actually hadn't really selected kind of technology as an area that I wanted to work in, despite having done an engineering degree. And at the time I was in a role, and I was sort of, you're 20 something, you're making money, so I'm like, it's all good. And I wanted to go traveling. And so my mum, being the diligent mother that she is, she wanted to make sure that I had an insurance policy in place to make sure that I would actually return, and that I wasn't just going to go off traveling to Asia and never come back again. And so she asked me to kind of apply for a number of roles before I left to go traveling, and I did actually secure a role. And in 2005, I joined Tesco as an IT graduate. And again, for those that don't know the company, it's a grocery retailer in the UK, but has global presence in Asia and other countries as well. And I had a great career there. I spent about 10 years there, and I was working lots of different roles, from business analysis to project and program management, and then led on to various sort of heads of and leadership roles, all within technology there. And then sort of fast forward another few years, I joined Paddy Betfair just over a year ago. And so that's kind of a bit about me. And what I wanted to then sort of move on to was, well, actually, what have I learned, right? So for all of you that are sitting, out there sitting, 20 something, 30 something, reasonably sort of early or even midway in your career, what are the things that I can share to help you on your journey? And so there are a couple of things, really. The first thing is, take control of your career. I think sometimes there's this kind of sense of you need to have this kind of very extravagant, 10-year plan. What's your development? Where are you working towards? And actually, my experience has been that I haven't been that particularly planned. I don't have a 10-year plan. Even now, I don't have a 10-year plan. But what I do have is real clarity on the role that I'm currently doing and how that's helping my development. And further, what do I want my next role to support? How do I want my next role to support my development? And that's really important. And owning your development is really important, because my experience has been, you can always get great advocates and great people to support you, but actually you've got to be really, really clear about what you're trying to achieve. So I would say take the opportunity to, write that down, have a development plan, keep it living and breathing, and take the opportunities to talk about that to, quite frankly, whoever will listen, about the things that you're working on that you want to develop, both personally and in your career. The second thing is, I always liken career planning to be more like a train journey. If I think back to, when I first started at Tesco, I kind of wanted, an X role at this level in this company by this time. And my learning through the years has been that actually you've got to be prepared for some roadblocks and some diversions, and actually putting those roles into perspective in the wider context of the fact that we have careers that are 30 or 40 years long nowadays, because people are working well into their 60s. And so be really clear about, when you are taking a role, what are the compromises that you're willing to take. And I wanted to share an example with you here where, I said earlier, I spent just over a decade at Tesco, and it had come to a point where I realised that actually I needed to leave and I needed to move on to something that was going to help grow me further. I then took on a role at a company called Whitbread, who, for those of you that know Premier Inn Hotels or Costa Coffee, until recently that's the kind of over group company that owned those brands. And when I took on that role, it was a narrower role with smaller responsibilities. But I was really clear that even though the responsibilities was lower, I was a lower grade, it was going to give me experience of another sector, and it was going to help me fulfill some of my other commitments as well. So, at that time I had a young family, and I didn't want to be doing really long commutes to and from the office. And the Whitbread role was quite close to my home, and so it was only a 40-minute drive. And so in balance, that was a compromise I made. And actually, having looked back on that in reflection, it was the role that I did prior to joining Paddy Power, Betfair, and actually I learned a lot from that. It helped me learn about a different sector, and so that's still development, and it's still progression in your career, even though at the time it probably might not feel like it. And the third thing it taught me was a valuable lesson about not attaching a goal or a timeline to your plan. So it's very easy for us to say, by the time I get to a certain age, I want to be making so much money, or I want to be at a certain level or a certain title. And often if you don't get there, then that can be really demotivating. And what I would definitely say is, do think about, the goal that you want, but frame that goal not by a title or by a timeline. Frame that goal by a set of competencies or a set of skills or a set of opportunities that you'd like to have at that point in your career. And that might be something like, I really want to lead teams, or I really want to have a real depth of knowledge in a particular technology, for example. And so, I think that then allows you to focus, whichever role that you're in, at whatever point you are in your career, to focus on that goal in the context of what's going to be motivating for you and what's going to really challenge and stretch you, rather than a time or a title. And I think the other part of the train journey analogy, if I can continue it, is a real focus on feedback. Feedback's really important, and I think, by our nature, sometimes women hesitate to ask for the feedback. And so my experience has been that actually it's always nice to hear the nice things, and often you'll get enough people that will tell you all the great things that you're doing, but really try and find the people and the nuggets of information that are going to help you grow. And often sometimes they're not the nice things, sometimes they're the things you need to do better. But don't see those as criticisms, see them as constructive ways to build who you are and build how you work. So a real focus on feedback, and those nuggets will help you move forward and help you to refocus on, how you get to the goals that I just talked about. So in summary, kind of lessons that I've learned are: take control. It's your development, you own it. It's a journey. Think of it as a train journey. There's going to be roadblocks, and don't get demotivated by those. And set goals. Don't set a timeline. And finally, focus on that feedback, because feedback is going to be the thing that really helps you change and develop. And so kind of those are sort of my learnings really from the 10 or 15 years that I've been working. And then I kind of wanted to move on to probably some friendly advice, or sharing of maybe some of the mistakes that I may have made along the way that I certainly don't want any of you to repeat. And so again, I would probably sort of describe those as 3 or 4 things. And the first thing is know your value. What do I mean by that? So for me, I think it took a long time to really understand what my strengths were, what are the things that I'm really good at, but also know what motivates me, and what are the things that drive me forward in getting up in the morning and going to work. Going to my office at this point in lockdown. It's not going anywhere. And it was those sorts of things. I think, again, sort of typically, and I don't want to stereotype, but typically women more than men sort of struggle to talk about, what are the things that drive you? Is it money? Is it a salary that's going to drive you and motivate you? And actually there's nothing wrong with that. And I think be unapologetic about that, because it's not just down to a salary, for example, or a title. It's what those things enable for you in your life, not just in work, but outside of work. And the second thing is that, careers are marathons, not sprints, right? They're long drawn out things, and actually, building on the strengths and using your strengths to push you forward in your career is the way to be successful. But in order to do that, you need to know what your strengths are, and so don't be afraid of sharing those, and find a way of doing that sort of quite authentically without it feeling too egotistical or arrogant. But I think really honing in on amplifying those strengths, because we often just focus on the development areas, which isn't always right. And then the other one was change and how we approach change. So I think if you were to ask me 10 years ago, I would have said, reorg, and I've been through a number of those now, and funnily enough, even at Paddy Betfair, we're currently in the process of trying to get some transitionary phases up and running for the merger that we've just gone through. And typically, a few years ago, 10 years ago, that would have been a really anxious time for me. What's that change going to mean? Is that going to mean redundancies? What's that going to mean for my role? Am I going to have a new boss? All these questions, and all those questions are really natural, but perspective is really important. So actually look at change as an opportunity and find the opportunities, because more often than not, change creates opportunity. And actually it's funny because there's a really good book in this space. If you've ever read Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson, it's actually a great book, and it really talks about changing your perspective on change and embracing change and looking for what good can come out of that, because there is always opportunity through change. The third thing is say no. And I would probably say it's something that I still struggle with, is to say no. I think, again, generally women more than men will sort of take on the world, will take on all the efforts and, all of the commitments, whether that's family commitments, whether that's walking the dog, whether that's, chores in the house, social calendars, all sorts. And what I would say is that, having, doing what I do and having the role that I have has a lot to do with the network that I've set up around me, and, it's about, you know, we often talk about having the difficult conversations with colleagues or having difficult conversations with your manager. Actually, it's just as important to have those difficult conversations with your support network. So if you're married, if you've got partners, you know, you've got parents, brothers, sisters around you that support you every day. I think it's really important to help them understand the role that they play in supporting you to be the best that you can be at work, you know. Much to my mum and my mother-in-law's disgust, I do have a cleaner. I love my cleaner. She's fantastic. And, you know, it means that I don't have to do chores on a Saturday. But that's okay, because all of those decisions and all of those compromises that we make all contribute to allowing you to maintain a better balance. So, you know, have those conversations, not just at work, but outside of work as well, in terms of what do you need, what do you, you know, how do you map out success outside of work as well. And then finally, I think, you know, in my career, it took me a long time to work out that you need great teachers around you. Now, I know that sounds very naive, but again, you know, women don't generally reach out for that mentorship, for that support, for coaching. You know, do embrace that, look for those opportunities, ask people for help. I'm very fortunate. I have a great set of mentors, both in and outside of Paddy Power, who really have helped me to understand the business, understand, you know, commercial elements of the business, but also have helped me with my personal development and looking for opportunities to allow me to grow within the business. And so I think that again, thinking about the support network, they're so important to find the right people that are going to help encourage you to focus on development as well. So, you know your value, make sure you find that out. Opportunity is change, you know, change your perspective on change. Say no more and learn how to say no. And finally, I would say, you know, really look for those really good teachers around you. And then I think, you know, it's my kind of final thought, I guess, that I wanted to leave you with was, you know, framing you and framing your message is everything. And what do I mean by that? So often as women, we're advised to, you know, be brave, be bold. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes what that translates into is be a bulldozer. And actually, it's not that. It's not sometimes, you know, women are criticized for being too aggressive or too sort of in your face. And actually, that's not how I would describe it. The way I would describe good framing is, you know, radical candor. And again, if you've not read that book, it's by a lady called Kim Scott, who's great. But it goes back to my earlier point, which is have more open conversations and make them a part of your everyday routine. You know, is that an open conversation with your partner, your managers, with yourself? You know, be honest with yourself and really think about the messages that you're trying to land. And when you're trying to land those messages, actually, it takes planning. It takes time to sit down, think about it. Sometimes you have to write it down. But that's how you bring about a practice of really framing, okay, what is it that I'm trying to get across here? What am I trying to land in my messaging? And that allows you to take a step back and to still, you know, be bold and be brave and have the hard conversations, but really think about how the impact that you're having on others. So that would be my final top tip. Thank you for whoever, you know, if you've tuned in and you're listening to this, or if you're listening to this recorded back. And I think there might be someone online now. So if there are questions, I'm happy to take those at this point.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your talk. And I know I'm a guy and I got a lot of insight from it. So thanks a lot for that. And at the beginning of your talk, you said you should chase your next job thinking about how it is going to develop you as a person professionally, and maybe as a person as well. Yeah. And I know, and I'm guilty of this as well, at some point we start thinking about the salary more, and we start chasing salaries a lot more. And probably not at the beginning of our careers, because we're just happy to go to work somewhere. But yeah, how can we avoid doing this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think, look, I kind of sort of mentioned it when I was talking, which is every next step comes with a compromise, right? And so the example that I would give is, with a salary comes a set of responsibilities and potentially some additional stress as well. So I think you really have to balance those things out and really ask yourself, yes, the salary is important, and maybe the salary is going to be important because it's going to support a particular part of your lifestyle, because that's where you need the money to do that. But is the compromise of the additional stress, or it might be in a longer commute time, for example, the distance or location of the office, or travel required, are you considering those in balance? And because there will be compromises you have to make, and I think that's an individual choice. Then you have to sort of think about the whole role, not just the kind of salary part of it.
All right, that's cool. And you said that women are a lot more hesitant to ask for feedback, and I may be falling to the same category. I mean, I'm scared to ask for feedback, even on smaller stuff. Yeah. And does this fear go away the more I ask for feedback, or is it still there?
There's a common analogy that's used, right? Which is, the more you push your comfort zone, the bigger it gets. So definitely practice pushing your comfort zone, because the more you do that and the more you practice at doing the things that make you uncomfortable, over time, the easier they will get. Again, so for example, something like this, public speaking, for me 10 years ago, I would have just said no, not done it. But I think you get to a point where you've got to put yourself out there. And also, I think it's also important to remember, look, what's the worst that could happen, right? It's one person's opinion. You can choose to either take on that feedback and do something with it, or you can choose to say, actually, I don't agree with that, and I have a different perspective.
This is probably why people are scared about asking for feedback, because they imagine all the scenarios possible, and they even go thinking about the worst thing that can actually happen. And they have to realize that, it's basically one guy's opinion or your manager's opinion, and most of the time it's probably constructive. Yeah. It's great. Thank you for being with us, and thank you, Betfair, for supporting Women in Tech, this stream that we are actually on right now. And thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.